And we're back with TNW TV. I'm Alejandro Tauber, editor-in-chief of The Next Web, and I'm here with Gilad Lotan, VP of Data Science at Buzzfeed. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So you gave a talk this morning, which we actually live streamed as well. But for the benefit of the viewers at home that might not have seen it, would you mind kind of recapping what your talk was about?
Sure. Yeah, so I run the data science and analytics team at Buzzfeed, and the focus of my talk was about how we utilize data and what we build around different tooling around data at Buzzfeed, and how we think it gives us many advantages, gives our team superpowers, but at the same time consider all the consequences that come with collecting data, running inferences, creating models on data, and some of the ways and approaches in which we've chosen to take to try to mitigate for these consequences.
Right. Yeah, so I think BuzzFeed is kind of maybe the most famous within the whole media world for using data and applying that to maybe generate the maximum amount of attention for the content that you make. Is that still kind of BuzzFeed's secret formula?
I mean, I think it's one of the things we do well. I think also we just have really good content creators, really, really good. And I would say more than anything, the secret sauce is staying close to the audience as much as possible. So we have websites that we own, obviously we have apps, but what we also do that's very different from other publishers is try to stay as close as we can to audiences on social networks, so off platforms, and we operate some massive pages on Facebook, on Snap, on Instagram, on YouTube. We have big channels, and our curators are very attuned to how people respond to content there, but we also use data to try to understand what is moving audiences in these platforms.
Right. So that's interesting. So in your talk, you talked about how data is used, how you use also machine learning to process that data, and also to inform your creators on what topics might be interesting. But I was wondering, so what would you say is kind of the split between, how much is machine and how much is the creator?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends on the use case. Places where we're seeing a lot more automation are use cases where there's a lot of laborious and manual work. Like in the past, we have hundreds of Facebook pages, for example, and they used to be all curated manually. So someone would make a decision to publish a piece of content on a certain page at a certain point of time. A lot of that is automated right now and can be automated because of historical data and machine learning. And so we're finding a lot of value there, where now our curators, who are still really important, they have time to look at trends, think about strategy, be creative, try experiments, see results, and help sort of iterate our strategy on social. Whereas before, all they had time to do is just sort of take a piece of content and publish it.
Right.
So on the curation side, on these pages, there's a lot of automation or semi-automation. And there are other cases which are still very, it's like there's some recommendations from these algorithmic systems, but most of the work is creative, right?
So imagine I'm a BuzzFeed writer, right? And I have an idea for a post. Let's say, so here are 6 puppies that love driving Teslas.
You should work
on
at BuzzFeed.
autopilot, and that was actually a post of ours, and do porn in them. That probably wouldn't be on BuzzFeed, right? But is that something that, so would I check that against the machine?
No.
Or would that just be something that I start writing and then the machine knows where to put it so that it...
We don't pretend that we'll be able to tell our writers what to publish. They are so good at what they do. They're so close to the audiences. And they just, they have great ideas and they can publish whatever they want. But we do provide tools to help optimize the process of distributing the content. And so you have a piece of content, we'll help you identify the right headline to use on Facebook or the right headline on YouTube or on the site. We maybe help you pick a better image if you want more visibility for your content. We'll give you metrics. We'll tell you how much time people spent on your content. How how does it compare to a typical piece of content in that channel, right? So we'll give you all this context around the audience, and so you can make decisions on your next piece of content.
Right. So images, it's interesting that you say that. That's a big thing for us. It's something that we changed in, I don't know, maybe in the past year and a half or so. We go for a very conceptual style of images. But I'd like to learn from Buzzfeed, from the juggernaut. What are some characteristics maybe of an image that make it stand out or make it better?
We find that split images work really well when you have like 2 images in one. We find that faces obviously draw a lot more attention. People are more interested when there's a face. And then finally, images that are sort of look and feel authentic and user-generated tend to perform a lot better than your super stylistic, beautiful
stock photo.
Right. Yeah, so we try to use we call them UGC style pictures, because they're more authentic.
Yeah. So I think we noticed that difference as well. In your talk, you also spoke about what you do with data on the back end, and there was an interesting bit that you were talking about location data. Mm-hmm. That is something that Buzzfeed consciously decided to not collect. But I have a critical question there. Of course, Buzzfeed is the site where people go to. But you also have, you work with different partners that have different trackers. And is that also something that you can kind of disallow for all the trackers, that they can't collect the location data when someone visits Buzzfeed as well? Yeah,
so we have agreements with, and it depends on the third party.
Right.
But sometimes that's in place. And to give context to the audience about the example, is that what we did was look at location data, because we know that there are claims, at least in the ad tech world, that, location is kind of like the future of conversion, understanding where people are actually going to shop. So a lot of companies are selling this data without user knowledge at all, and claiming that there's no personally identifiable information. It's just a log, like latitude, longitude, timestamp. So it's just trends.
Yeah.
But what I showed in the presentation was just how very easy it is to go from log to very personal information about your bank account, your home address.
I thought that was super scary.
The school your kids go to. And so I think, one, we need to recognize that with this information, if you manipulate it a certain way, and it's very simple steps, it's not anything complicated, you could turn it into information that's very personal.
Right.
And so we need to be aware of that's happening.
That felt very surprising. I mean, and I was wondering, did you do anything afterwards with that analysis? So what did you turn that into a piece of content to make people aware of?
Yeah, there was a piece that was published. So it's content that's published about this. We made some decisions not to collect or link location information to behavioral data that we have. And
so I think my question is more about kind of the bigger picture. So you as a data scientist, you can gain a lot of insight into processes that might not be clear up front for most readers. And you gave a couple of examples in your talk, of course. But do you also use those analyses that you do to make people aware afterwards through your media channels as well?
Yeah, I mean, and we report on many issues around manipulation, around data usage. So we do use our channels to discuss these issues. I think it's important to know, like BuzzFeed was super early. BuzzFeed News was very early on the manipulation, misinformation, on that front. We were reporting on this before, like, the term fake news was so popular. So we definitely highlight all these issues and try to hold platforms to account. But what I think is so interesting about us is a just truly digital media company, like solely digital and very tech and data focused. We kind of sit in between all the platforms. So we work very closely with Facebook.
Right.
On products that they launch. We're probably one of their biggest consumers of their APIs. Many times we know their products. I feel like we know their products better than them because we use that. We're super users.
Yeah.
We have the biggest pages on Facebook. And so we could see trends and we could see issues. We could see, I had an example of bots, people who were manipulating the ranking system. And we reported to them. We're like, this is happening. But we have an incredible news operation that's very critical of what they do. So we're kind of in between.
Yeah. So, and how does that feel for you personally? Because we recently hired someone that basically has the same job as you, but for us. And what we noticed instantly from that is that even pretty basic manipulations already result in pretty unique stories that people don't know about. Simply that they simply don't know the things that are happening with their data on the back end. Do you feel that your role as VP of Data Science, that you're becoming more important on kind of the content side as well?
I mean, I think there have been opportunities, and we have this working group that's really interesting. It's between the tech side, so engineers, data scientists, and the investigative team, and it's like a chat room, and everyone's throwing ideas. It's like, yo, hey, I read this. Is this possible? Or can someone help me? A reporter may ask, like, oh, I'm doing this deep dive. Need someone with expertise on, like, IP addresses, etc. So something that came out of this collaboration is we did this piece looking into YouTube's algorithmic recommender system.
Yep.
And we built some very simple tech to look at what's recommended given a search term and following it like down a few searches and clicks. And we used that data to put together a story around ranking and how messed up some situations are. And we reported that story.
But that must feel pretty cool, right? So normally this was kind of back-end work, but now it's moving more maybe towards, the front, because people are getting are more aware of, everything that can happen there. And they need the expertise of people like you to bring that out.
Yeah, no, it's super fun to be able to collaborate with journalists on some of these topics.
So I had one more question, maybe short. In your talk, you talked about so when you come up with new products, you try to think of the worst case scenario for that product in terms of maybe data abuse or personally identifiable information or whatever. And I was wondering, do you have an example that you can share of that, of kind of one case that you thought, oh, we didn't know that this could happen, and this is really bad. Let's not do this.
What's the most evil use case? So what I mentioned in the talk is that we scenario build, and for every RFC, which is request for comments, which is very common when you're building products. So like, here's an RFC, here's details about what I want to build. Give me comments. So we have a section that talks about consequences. Like, what's the worst thing that could be done? There have been some interesting examples around targeting. So targeting, something that we do. I mean, we run sponsored campaigns on our site, and we target, certain populations. It's very common to do. Usually, you target people who view videos or just people under a certain demographic. So in the scenarios, this is not an example of a case that we had to actually deal with. It's more an envisioned scenario.
So fictional.
But we have different campaigns about mental health, for example. There's Mental Health Week. We run content on the different importance of dealing with mental health and different approaches, and it's a set of content that we run. We could hypothetically get asked by a pharma company to target users who consume our Mental Health Week content. And so that was a scenario that we have to put together a process where we can make the right decision and make sure, targeting susceptible populations, especially around sort of medical interventions, is stopped at a certain point. So thinking about the process and how do we make sure we're making the right decision.
So that's how you try to prevent these kinds of misuses maybe.
So this didn't happen, but this was a worst case scenario.
So you think of these things beforehand so that you can avoid doing
and you can make the right decision when they come up.
Yeah, that's. That sounds like something very sensible to do, and I honestly I haven't heard of other media companies that have been thinking about that very much, and with the amount of implicit data that can be gathered about pretty big groups of people, and even the specificity of that data, so the people that can be targeted after that. I mean, that's really something that publications need to think about. And maybe not even publications, but apps as well. I mean, basically everything on the web that uses cookies or that has different trackers.
Yeah, and I mean, the problem is when you're smaller, it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of effort. But yeah, it's important. And I think, as I said in my presentation, it's up to all of us to make sure we're aware of these problems and are working towards solutions. We can't just sit around and hope that someone else solves the problem.
Absolutely. So, are we done? Are you hopeful or are you pessimistic about the future?
I'm hopeful.
Yeah?
I'm hopeful by nature. That's just me. But also, I think these are powerful technologies. I'm definitely seeing positive trends in the industry. But I have to say I'm hopeful.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you're hopeful. I am too. But we do have to always be aware of the possible consequences. I think those scenarios, especially, I'd be super interested to hear more of that off the record if you want to talk to me. Thank you very much for walking. Thank you, Gilad.
Thanks for having me.
Keep watching TNW TV. We have a lot more to come.